My name is Mike, and I work as a pizza delivery guy in the small town of Riverdale. The job isn't something you dream about all your life, but it allows me to make a living. That evening, when everything changed, I was working the night shift. The sky was overcast, and it looked like a storm was about to start. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, I received an order to deliver pizza to the old industrial area on the outskirts of town. It was strange because no one usually ordered pizza there. The address pointed to an abandoned warehouse, and I felt a bit uneasy. But work is work. I placed the hot pizza in the car and set off. When I reached the warehouse, it was already completely dark outside. The building looked abandoned, broken windows, collapsed walls, and a thick layer of dust on everything that could be seen. I stopped the car near the entrance and got out, holding the pizza box in my hands. As I approached the door, I heard a faint noise. It sounded like someone quietly talking or whispering inside. My heart started beating faster, but I knocked. No one answered. I knocked again, and this time the door slowly creaked open as if by itself. I stepped inside, and my eyes gradually adjusted to the darkness. It was cool inside, and there was a smell of moisture and mold. I looked around, trying to see who might be there, but saw no one. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Did you bring the pizza?" asked a quiet male voice. I turned around and saw a man in dark clothes standing in the shadows. His face was barely visible, but his eyes glowed with strange lights. "Yes, here's your pizza," I replied, trying not to show my concern. The man stepped out of the shadows and took the box from my hands. His hands were cold, like ice. "How much do I owe you?" he asked. But there was something unusual in his voice, something that made my nerves tighten like strings. $15, I said, watching as he opened his wallet. He pulled out an old wrinkled bill and handed it to me. The moment I took the money, the cold feeling became even stronger. "Thank you," I said, trying to leave this place as quickly as possible. But when I turned to the door, it was closed. "Excuse me, but I have to go," I said, feeling panic starting to rise in me. "You can't leave," the man replied, and his voice became even more menacing. I felt goosebumps on my skin. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "You entered my home without an invitation, and now you'll stay here forever," he said, and his face began to change. His eyes grew brighter, and I saw his skin start to peel off, revealing a dark, sinister glow underneath. I rushed to the door, trying to escape this dreadful place, but it wouldn't open. Behind me, I heard heavy footsteps approaching. Turning around, I saw the man transforming into something inhuman. His body stretched and deformed, and his eyes burned with a bright flame. I started screaming for help, but there was no one in the industrial area. My scream echoed off the warehouse walls, but no one heard me. The man, or whatever it was almost upon me when I finally managed to break a window and jump outside. My hands and face were cut by the glass, but I didn't feel the pain due to the adrenaline. I ran to my car, glancing over my shoulder. No one was chasing me, but in the doorway of the warehouse stood a figure, its eyes glowing in the dark, watching me. I jumped into the car and hit the gas, not looking back. At home, I couldn't sleep for a long time, haunted by the horrific images of that evening. I tried to tell my friends about it, but they didn't believe me. They said it was just a dream or a hallucination from fatigue. But I knew it was real, and now I always avoid deliveries to the old industrial area. Since then, I no longer work as a pizza delivery guy. My fear of returning to that warehouse was too strong. But I know one thing. There are things in this world that we cannot explain, and sometimes it's better to leave them alone. Now, every time I hear about strange disappearances or creepy stories, I remember that evening in the cold eyes of the man in the shadows, and I realize that true horror lives next to us. Just look into the darkness. I'm a courier in a small town in the western United States. The job was always routine, but one night everything changed. It was an ordinary evening with few orders, and I was already dreaming of getting home quickly. Our pizzeria operator informed me about a new order, adding that the customer who placed it had spoken quite strangely. The order was on the outskirts of our small town, a place I had never been before. I set off, trying to ignore the strange premonitions. I thought to myself, haven't there been odd orders before? However, the closer I got to the specified address, the more fear gripped me. The address led to a remote part of town where there were no houses. I decided to call the customer since the phone number was attached to the order. She answered quickly. Her voice was gentle but cold at the same time. She said I needed to drive a bit further, closer to the forest. I hesitated, but she insisted politely, and I agreed. Driving further, I still didn't see any houses. This scared me even more. I stopped near the forest when I saw headlights among the trees. It was a small trailer that looked very neglected. I called the customer again, and she said to come closer. As I got off the scooter, I saw a man who looked very ill, pale, like a ghost. He silently walked behind the trailer. Then the woman appeared. She was smiling so strangely that it sent chills down my spine. She said she was going to get the money. Suddenly, a man with something resembling an axe ran out from behind the trailer. He was running straight at me, and without thinking, I ran back to the scooter. The pizza flew out of my hands, but I didn't care. I sped away as if the devil himself was chasing me. Only after returning to the cafe could I tell my colleagues what had happened. They immediately called the police. When the cops arrived at the place where I had seen the trailer, there was nothing there. No trailer, no strange couple. Because of the fear, I couldn't describe those people, even though their faces constantly appeared in my memory. It took me a month to muster the courage to deliver food again, but that incident stayed with me forever. I never delivered to the outskirts of town at night again. Now I understand that even the most ordinary job can hide dangers lurking around the corner. That night, I could have lost my life, and I still don't know who those people were or what they wanted. However, now I'm always prepared for the worst, even if I'm just delivering pizza. That night, my story didn't end. Over the following months, I felt like I was being watched. Every time I went on shift, I had the feeling that those same eyes that saw me that night were somewhere nearby. My boss offered me a vacation, but I refused. I felt that running away would only make me more vulnerable. One day, several months after the incident, I was returning home after a shift when I saw something strange. Near my house was the same trailer. It looked as run down as it did that night. I froze in fear. The trailer door opened and I saw the same woman. Her smile was even stranger than I remembered. She nodded as if inviting me to come closer. I didn't know what to do. I went back to the house and locked the door. I decided to ignore it and try to sleep. However, all night I heard strange noises outside. In the morning, the trailer was gone, but tire tracks remained where it had been. From that day on, I couldn't sleep peacefully. Every sound at night seemed to be a sign that they had returned. Sometimes I think it's all just my imagination. Maybe I was overworked, and it was all a hallucination. But every time I see glowing eyes in the dark or hear a rustle outside the window, I remember that night and realize that not everything is so simple. I don't know what they wanted from me, but I know that that night I came close to something better left unknown. This was my last night as a courier. I decided to change jobs and start a new life in another city. However, even there, far from my old life, I feel that the shadows of the past continue to haunt me. Sometimes I think this will never end. My name is David, and I work as a delivery driver for a small pizzeria on the outskirts of Brookhaven. I always loved my job, being outside, meeting different people, listening to their stories. But one evening, my usual routine turned into a real nightmare that I will never forget. It was a late Friday evening. The pizzeria was, as always, overwhelmed with orders. I got the task to deliver 2 large pizzas to a new area of the city known for its large and expensive houses. When I arrived at the given address, A huge, newly built villa stood before me. Loud music was coming from its windows, and I thought it was probably a party. I grabbed the pizzas and approached the door. Ringing the bell, I heard someone approaching the door. A blonde woman in revealing clothes opened it for me. She smiled and invited me inside. I was a bit surprised, but stepped in anyway. Inside, the house looked completely different from what I expected. The walls were adorned with old paintings and strange statuettes, giving the place an eerie look. I also noticed an unpleasant smell, reminiscent of rotten food or garbage. The woman took me by the hand and led me upstairs. I felt uncomfortable but tried not to show it. The corridor was long and dark, lit only by dim lamps hanging from the ceiling. As we reached the second floor, I heard a horrific scream. It was coming from somewhere very close. I stopped and looked at the woman. Her face suddenly changed. She looked scared. Then she started screaming and cursing, pulling me by the hand further towards the stairs. Fear overtook me. I yanked my hand away and ran down the stairs. The woman tried to stop me, but I was faster. Bursting out of the house, I ran to my car. With a pounding heart, I started the engine and drove away quickly. Looking back, I saw a man standing in the house's window, staring right at me. After driving to a safe distance, I stopped and called the police. I told them everything that had happened and asked them to come as soon as possible. The police arrived within minutes. They checked the house but found nothing suspicious. The house was empty and up for sale. No signs of a party, no women, no men. I was in shock. I couldn't believe that all of this was real. That same night, I received a text message from an unknown number. "We know where you work." My heart froze. I realized this was no joke. I immediately quit my job and changed my phone number, trying to avoid any further contact with this incident. But the story didn't end there. Every time I saw a new house or heard loud music, memories of that night would resurface. I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, afraid those people would find me again. A few weeks after the incident, I decided to contact my friend who worked as a private detective. His name was Michael, and he had many contacts in the police and other law enforcement agencies. I told him my story, and he promised to help. Michael began his investigation. He visited the house where it all happened and made several inquiries to the local police. A few days later, he called me and asked to meet at his office. When I arrived, he looked concerned. "David," he said, "I found something interesting. That house where you were really is up for sale, but there's one catch. A few years ago, a gruesome murder took place there. The woman who lived in that house was found dead in the basement. The killer was never found. Since then, the house has changed owners several times, but all of them sold it quickly due to some inexplicable events." My heart began to beat faster. This explained a lot, but also raised even more questions. Who were those people I saw? Why are they following me? And most importantly, what do they want? Michael advised me to be careful and not to talk to anyone about our conversation. He continued his investigation while I tried to go on with my life, though in constant fear. I changed jobs and moved to another city, hoping to leave it all behind. But one evening, as I was returning home from work, I noticed that I was being followed. A black car had been tailing me from the pizzeria to my house. My heart froze. I tried to stay calm and not show that I had noticed the surveillance. Turning onto a neighboring street, I abruptly stopped and looked in the rearview mirror. The car had also stopped at a distance. I decided to act. Instead of going home, I drove to the nearest police station. As I got out of the car, the vehicle quickly turned around and drove off in the opposite direction. I went inside and told the on-duty officer everything that had happened. They promised to investigate the matter, but I wasn't sure if it would help. The next day, I received another text message. "Do you think you can run?" My heart stopped. I understood that these people were not going to leave me alone. Michael advised me to change all my habits, routes, and even my place of residence. I decided to disappear for a while. Packing my things, I moved to another state and started a new life. For several months, I managed to avoid any suspicious situations. I even began to think that it was all over. But one day when I came home from work, I found an envelope on the doorstep of my new house. Opening it, I saw only one photograph inside. It was me, getting out of the car near the police station that night. On the back, it was written, "We will always be watching you." This experience has forever changed my life. I can no longer trust people and always expect the worst. Living in constant fear is exhausting, but I have no other choice. One thing I know for sure, I will never return to that pizzeria and will never forget the chilling experience that changed me forever.